Hello and welcome, grab an egg and enjoy my review of The Midwich Cuckoos by British science fiction giant John Wyndham, author of, among other things, The Day of the Triffids. The Midwich Cuckoos was published in 1957 and later filmed as The Village of the Damned. It follows the events that are set in motion by a mysterious visitation from, potentially, across the stars. And before we get any deeper into the plot, this is your obligatory reminder that you can use the slider below or the chapters in the description to skip this part of the video, but you shouldn't consider the rest of it spoiler-free either. The story is related in the first person by Richard Gayford, who is married to Janet, a native of the small, insignificant English village called Midwich. Returning home after celebrating Janet's birthday, they discover the two roads to the village blocked by the army and the police. Abandoning their car, they decide to return home across the fields and are, some distance from the village, rendered unconscious. The events that occur during Gayford's unexpected nap are related, with the acknowledgement that he was not there to witness them. It turns out a gradual build-up of crashed vehicles and people napping on the road has alerted the emergency services that something is afoot. Aerial photographs reveal a strange artifact in the village and that the inhabitants, where visible, are all unconscious. A force field projected in a dome has cut off Midwich, and any persons attempting to enter immediately collapse. Gayford and wife are dragged from the edge of the field and awaken. They're barred from the village and retire to a local pub where they meet Bernard, an old army buddy and now government bigwig. However, after a day or two, the force field lifts, and with the inhabitants of the village mostly unaffected, things go back to normal. Yet it isn't long before the village's entire female population realises that they're pregnant, including those of an age where claiming to be a virgin isn't that unlikely. Bernard wants this hushed up, and ever so British and eager to avoid outside scorn, some of the villagers form a committee that takes it upon themselves to do just that, for the greater good. There are a few dissenters, but the peace holds and the secret is kept from the wider world. However, the children once born are a little creepy, slightly different in an uncanny way and remarkably similar to each other. Things take a step further, even creepier, when one mother of a new baby is found poking herself over and over with a needle. She said she was compelled to do so after accidentally pricking the child while changing it. This is not taken too seriously by the committee, who are working hard to keep things quiet. Part 2 skips forward 9 years, and Gayford, having left the village some years earlier, returns for a brief visit. The children are very advanced for 9-year-olds, easily passing for 16. They are still very alike, and few except their surrogate mothers can tell them apart. There is some trouble. One of the children is hit by a car. Witnesses claim it was a pure accident that the driver did his best to avoid. However, he then drove, seemingly deliberately, into a brick wall. Many locals suggest that children are responsible, having witnessed other events, leading them to believe that they share a degree of mind control as well as a hive mind of their own. By now, the children are mostly living at a previously abandoned government laboratory, now serving as their school. There is an attempt to force them to leave, which fails and results in a self-destructive riot. The police chief investigating suffers a nervous collapse, and the local bigwig and the children's teacher suggest that whatever the source of the children, they represent a superior species and a threat to mankind. Similar events in other nations, including the Soviet Union, were ended violently, but our government seems slower and less decisive. Fearing a military strike on Midwich, the children use their mental abilities to hold the locals captive within the village limits. Can the people of Midwich find a solution and save, perhaps, the whole of mankind? The idea that the entire female half of a village could fall pregnant overnight, and that could be kept quiet, is quite British, I think. While bizarre or unusual, probably wouldn't warrant a significant amount of media attention after the news first broke. There's always more news after all, and as the little village just went about its business, the news interest would rapidly wane. That is, unless reluctant and suspicious fathers started getting angry and taking it out on their innocent wives, unless terrified and unwilling mothers started spreading a panic. And that's where the story succeeds or fails. Do you believe in the quiet resolve of an English village to suffer through this to the end, or do you believe that wild panic would set in and that people would turn on each other? Because, with only one exception, Midwich bears up. Wyndham acknowledges the very Britishness of the situation, comparing it to similar events worldwide where superstition and brutality have, for the most part, ended the situation with violence. The notable exceptions are in Australia, where the sea didn't take, likely for barbecue-related reasons, and the Soviet Union. There, the communist government held a watching brief to see if the children could give them an edge in the Cold War, apparently seeing a threat to their way of life, even in hive-minded lookalikes. They then used them to test a new atomic cannon. The British Empire, again, was finally proving the doom prophecy as right. Though still alive, it was more alive and twitching than alive and kicking, and Wyndham knew where the blame lied. There has been no code of manners to tell us how to deal with anything invented since, not even rules for an individualist to break, which is itself another blow for freedom. Stagnation then has been allowed to take root, weakening the crop, with the solution to every problem being the same Luddite suppression or reluctant tolerance of innovation and individualism. The British problem is contrasted with a more diverse and dynamic United States, soon to usurp the role of world police and do it about as well as we ever did. Wyndham saw the change coming and describes beautifully the horrific traffic jam the barrier around Midwich causes. He had a sudden view of a fire engine, half-heeled over, with its near side wheels in the ditch, and a black saloon car which had climbed halfway up the bank on the other side, a few yards further on, with a man and a bicycle lying in the ditch behind it. This is contrasted with a very different but hypothetical American approach. Within 10 minutes, owing no doubt to the excellent communications in that country, there is coast-to-coast panic, and all the highways out of all the cities are crammed in all the lanes by the fleeing populace, except in Washington. There, by contrast, enormous crowds stretching as far as the eye can reach stand grave and silent, white-faced and trusting, with their eyes on the White House. Against this backdrop of chaos and calm, the problem is solved by a professor, his daughter and lab assistant, and just in the nick of time as well. Additional American diversity of thought, lefties please, gives them the willingness to act, while the freedom to boil up lab-based solutions to be embraced gives the country a dynamism that the British have lost. But Zellaby's theoretical American saviours can do nothing to help the British, who, with famed liberalism and tolerance for crutches, are only moved to inaction. The political factions, knowing that being the party that pulls the trigger on their equivalent of the Soviet atomics, with resultant collateral damage, is forever finished, and the opposition is not capable of doing the right thing if the wrong thing gives them more political clout. But the inaction becomes a threat to the human race as the way forward is clear. Zellaby and the book's title compare the children to cuckoos, and the only way to clear a nest of that menace is to kill it. This leads to a fabulous piece of Darwinian musing. I wonder if a sillier and more ignorant catachresis than Mother Nature was ever perpetrated. It is because nature is ruthless, hideous and cruel beyond belief that it was necessary to invent civilization. Anyone who knows about cuckoos can see a degree of truth in what Zellaby is saying here. Later he observes, "I am a civilized man. I shall not be able to bring myself to approve of what ought to be done." So civilization was required to protect us from nature, but the unnatural has come to take advantage of that very thing. From a more modern vantage, you might even find people saying that the trappings of civilization that protect us from nature are killing both it and inevitably us along with it. I suspect there is an ecological reading of this book out there somewhere. But the ever-civilized Zellaby chooses his words with care, and it is the certainty with which he uses ought which causes consternation among his fellows, not yet ready to commit murder, even as the vicar debates the morality and technicality of it. The children, though, acknowledge themselves, even in their youth, as a superior species, asking Bernard, "Will you agree to be superseded and start on the way to extinction without a struggle?" Having witnessed the destruction of their foreign colonies, the children are prepared for a similar response from the British that does not come, leaving a local response required in the finale. Continued inaction in Britain is a betrayal of our species. You can read into that if you wish, but I doubt it would be considered acceptable in modern academia. The Midwich Cuckoos is, if you can look beyond the inaction of the surrogate parents themselves, the broad acceptance of the phenomenon, a remarkable book. Though Wyndham sold considerably more books in America, it is distinctly British, evoking a pastoral paradise invaded. Someone in Opley reported a house on fire in Midwich, with apparently nothing being done about it. The trained fire appliance turned out, and thereafter failed to make any reports. Constable Gobby in Stout was rung up and sent off on his bicycle to Midwich, and no more was heard of him either. And having read 2 distinctly American science fiction novels recently, it was a really pleasant change of pace. There are undeniable parallels with American sci-fi, though the first act is all creepy action and pent-up tension, while the second involves an old man putting the youngsters to right and a sizable amount of talking and theorising. Wyndham even postulates here on religion and the idea that the children were sent here as the instigation for some kind of cosmic blood sport. As one might expect from Wyndham, it's written with a calm grace which makes the eerie children all the more spine-chilling. I'm not going to quote it here because the passage is too long, but the scene where Gayford and Bernard witness the extent of the children's powers is a tour de force of ellipsis, which normally I describe as particularly overdone. But because those children are so damn spooky, it works really well. In conclusion, the Midwich Cuckoos may contain less thrills and spills than you'd expect. It's quite a talky book, especially in the second part where the philosopher Zellaby comes to the fore. Yet there is undeniably a thought-provoking puzzle put forward here. The first half lays all the groundwork establishing the creepy setup and the unnerving children beautifully, contrasting their unearthly origins with a very humble location and perfectly judged matter-of-fact narration. It is an extraordinary work that is easy to recommend, particularly to fans of Wyndham's peers such as Asimov, Bradbury and Heinlein. My favourite passage in the book is so beautifully written and so incredibly unpolitically correct that I just have to include it here. If we remember that the majority of feminine tasks are deadly dull, they leave the mind so empty that the most trifling seeds that fall there can grow into a riotous tangle. 1957, everyone. Thanks for watching. Click the like and subscribe buttons an odd number of times. Bye.